Hello, and thank you for watching this weekly AgWeather update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. We're starting off with a map looking at the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. And again, this has featured several very heavy rainfall events that have come through parts of the Corn Belt down into the Ohio River Valley. We've seen flow coming off of the Gulf of Mexico that's really brought plenty of moisture into place, but we're kind of waiting on a more robust trigger mechanism to really deliver the rainfall to parts of the Carolinas. Notice as we kind of just zoom in here, there are several places throughout the Carolinas that have missed out on a lot of the recent rainfall, whereas parts, like I said, of the Corn Belt, for those of you that are growing corn and soybeans over here, have really seen some quite heavy rainfall that's really going to make a crop in parts of Iowa, Minnesota, southern Wisconsin, and throughout the state of Illinois. Now, when you think about this overall picture of the way the pattern's set up, let's also compare it to recent soil moisture maps. This is the latest soil moisture data we've got through the August the 8th. And I'm really focusing a lot on what we've seen along the coast from Georgia through South Carolina, North Carolina, right in through here. There's been some regional drought development. Of course, the drought in Texas has been historic. I'll show you some of the statistics from that in just a few seconds. But I'd like to make a point just to show you where those heavy rains came through versus where they're still needed. Back, for example, in parts of the Corn Belt in Iowa, northern Missouri, getting into parts of Nebraska are very much needed, parts of Kansas, and then pockets throughout North and South Dakota. So what's important to see about this pattern is that there are still places that are still seeing substantial risk throughout the midsection of the country, from the Corn Belt to the Cotton Belt, and those are course areas that we are, in competition with over North and South Carolina. But I thought I would just show you here, just to put some numbers onto this. This is the year-to-date precipitation ranks. So into Texas, this is an area that's having top 3, top 5 driest years on record. And the drought that's been ongoing in that area has been quite devastating. But I would like to point out, we're having, here in parts of the coastal Carolinas, go back to the whole year, and we're looking at a top 25, top 30 event in terms of being driest on record. So again, those records are back to 1893, and it just adds some perspective. And feel free to pause the video and take a close look at this map. It's got a lot of great information in it. But what I've been concerned mostly about is the last couple of weeks, because while we've seen some very hot temperatures, we've seen some drought redevelop here along the coast. This has been the corridor of heaviest rainfall. Many heavy rainfall events, 8 to 12 inches of rain from multiple events coming from St. Louis to parts of Kentucky, and then again just yesterday right in through here, which is going to show up on this map tomorrow. These maps I show you are always a day old because they have a one-day quality control algorithm that goes into place. But as you look at this, we do see that there are several places that have missed out on the rainfall, and we're looking at 10 to 30% of normal precipitation. And one of the big reasons for that has been this. Since the 20th of July up until just recently, we've actually seen the subtropical ridge kind of expand in this area. All right, so the flow kind of comes around it like this. And what that's done is that's delivered the moisture here, as we talked about a moment ago, but it's really prevented it with higher pressure, clearer skies, hotter conditions from coming up right up against the coast. And because there's been no big tropical system to come through, it's been able to get set up, and that's what's caused the problems that we've seen here with some drought development along our coast. Now, since we're talking about this, we need to ask ourselves, when does this pattern break down? And is there anything coming out of the tropics? Well, the National Hurricane Center's latest update today gives a 40% chance of development for a tropical cluster of thunderstorms just south of the Cabo Verde Islands, or the Cape Verde Islands here. But the conditions out ahead of it, while they're conducive for some growth, this is not something that we can really kind of pin down just yet. When you look out here at the model forecasts, we just don't see, you can't really look at this and say that the models have picked up on what this might possibly do. So we're just going to have to just watch it. We're going to have to pay attention to what happens here over the coming days and just to see if the system does eventually develop. So I want to tell you right now that National Hurricane Center's guidance on this is pretty accurate. It says, hey, this could develop. We'll watch it once it does. But at this point, there's quite a bit of dry and dusty air to the north of it. The wind shear is okay around it, but we just need to keep a close eye on this. Now, just to let you know, last week, NOAA did kind of do a quick update on their hurricane seasonal forecast. I'm just going to show it to you right here. They still have a 60% chance of it being above normal, a 30% chance of normal, and a 10% being below normal, which means the likelihood of this season having more than 14 to 15 named storms is pretty high. Now, with any given tropical cyclone season, It's all about where they go. So we're going to be talking a lot about whether or not ridges like this continue to form in this area going forward, to see if that pushes systems, for example, into the Gulf, which means we get the moisture as they come through the southeast rather than targeting us right here off of the coast. So just a reminder, if this subtropical ridge stays in place, that's going to be the track. If this subtropical ridge moves over to Bermuda, then systems tend to come out of the Atlantic and come right into the Carolinas. So just something to be on the lookout for there. But to support NOAA's forecast, Colorado State University updated theirs last week as well. They did go down by 2 storms. They had predicted 20 named systems for this year, but have given the slow start due to the very dry and dusty air that's been across the Atlantic. They've just made a slight adjustment down as well. They've also reduced the total accumulated cyclone energy. So we're still expecting to be above normal this year, but the season really has to have a good kick to get going. And what's kept its tight grip on this pattern has been La Nina. Now, normally when we talk La Nina, it's all about having an above active year. But this particular year, because of how strong the trades have been right there, okay, it's prevented the MJO from moving around from the Indian Ocean out into the Central Pacific. And you say, well, what does that have to do with hurricanes? Well, as the MJO moves back and forth across this line I'm drawing, it also changes where the best rising motion is. And we wait to see when we can get really active convection coming off of Africa that moves in these open waves that come across the Atlantic, or when we get better upper level support for rising motion in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico or here. But because of La Nina's dominance, it's not faded through the summer. Because of its dominance, it has really prevented us from getting, more active systems coming across the open Atlantic. In fact, there's been very strong trade winds through the Caribbean, and you can almost see like a little reflection here of an Atlantic La Nina-like feature with those stronger trade winds. But do note that the ocean temperatures are still above normal. They're plenty warm to develop tropical systems. So what we're waiting on here is the trigger, get something to go. But I would like to make a point here about this La Nina. The trade winds, I show this to you all the time, they're still cranked very strongly through this area through the middle and end of August. And the big question is, how long are we going to continue to see that? So we had some brand new data that was just released. Let's go look at the near term first and the long term second. Interestingly enough, the time period of mid-August to mid-September is being forecast for drier in parts of the Carolinas. Now, I think this is all because the way the model was initialized with that ridge sitting here. And as a result of this, I'm going to call this into question in a big way, because if that ridge moves out, we start to see things open up, or if a tropical system comes through, it could completely ruin this forecast. So I believe we are now in a time period where we're going to have to watch things day by day, week by week, to see how the tropics and the extratropics interact. And what's interesting about the extratropics, or what we call the mid-latitude flow, is that it keeps putting a ridge here and then letting it retrograde back to the west. That opens up a very active southwest monsoon. And interestingly enough, it's trying to deliver quite a bit of moisture into Texas. In fact, it's really trying to open this pattern up and deliver more moisture into Texas and robbing it from the Carolinas. Again, I have to see this happen, because that's not been, the atmosphere's not done that all year. And so this would represent a pretty substantial pattern change. And this one, to be honest with you, I'm not buying into it just yet. Okay, so we've got quite a few things to be watching for here. And I think we're moving into a time period where the sub-seasonal forecasting is going to show lower skill than it normally does. But we're still going to look at it. And we're also going to look at the seasonal forecasting data. And that's what I'm going to show you next. So I'm going to blow this view out to an equatorial view, and I want to show you ocean temperatures first. We'll do it month by month. You can see that through October, November, and December, La Nina still dominates the overall global picture. That's the cold water that's here, with the very warm water to the north of it between Hawaii and Alaska. So nothing's really changed too much in that regard. But if we come down back to the United States and say, well, what does this mean for our precipitation patterns? Well, take a look at this. This is August, September, October. But as I slide 1 month forward and get rid of August and then add November, boy, the models went really quite dry for parts of the lower Mississippi River Valley, the southeast getting up to the mid-Atlantic. And they keep it there through fall. Now, we have to look at this and do something with it and ask ourselves, is there actual risk of drought development this fall? Because the models did go aggressively over dry. I think it's partly the way they were initialized, but I can't not look at this and not see the La Nina signal. The La Nina signal is typically drier south of this line and wet here and wet there as you go into fall and early winter. And even going out there to December, January, February. This is as La Nina as you can get. Active Ohio River Valley storm track, wet in the Pacific Northwest, dry California, Texas into the southeast. I mean, that's La Nina to the T. I don't think this is going to verify. And the big reason for that is I think the La Nina, once we start to get into late fall, so I'm talking, let's say November, I think it's going to start to fade much more quickly than being anticipated. And some of my reasons for that really include what we've seen in the global wind patterns, what we've seen in terms of historically how long a third La Nina lasts. And while there's not a whole lot of analog evidence to support that, it just seems that as far to the west as these strong trade winds are currently located, to maintain the cool water signature, to keep the trade winds going like they're going, I don't see what would be so supportive of that. Plus, we have a seasonal transition in there as well, which could disrupt this. I'm just talking about going from summer to fall and fall to winter. So I, again, don't put much trust in what you see here. Now, just for the heck of it, I want to show you something. This was also released last week. It's the new Farmer's Almanac. Now, I don't know who writes this. I don't know where it comes from, but I did notice something quite peculiar about it, okay? A meteorologist named Hannah Strong wrote a little article about this last week, and I caught that article and I realized what she realized. I don't know if you noticed this, but the Farmer's Almanac maps look the same every winter. They just changed the wording. So this is the one that's for this winter. Here's last winter. Let's shrink that up so you can see it. It's the same coloring. They just, quite chilly mixed bag. Well, I don't know what any of this means. I hope you're not using this in your long-range forecasting because it just doesn't seem to be really offering much guidance. In fact, let's go back even a year before that. This would be the 2019-2020. You see the same color pattern? It just re-describes the same thing. Brisk and wet, quite chilly mixed bag, and then what was this one? Shivery, wet, and slushy. Sorry, I'm not sure what to do with that, but I thought you'd at least want to see it compared to what the models are suggesting. Now, we need to get back to what we're dealing with now, and it's this pattern. So let me just take this off here. There it goes. Subtropical ridge is still in place. That means for us over the next few days, we're going to see isolated storms and hot temperatures. But there is a front. It's underneath these stronger winds right in through here that is slowly moving its way toward us. And this is that tropical disturbance we're going to keep an eye on. But look at the trade winds, and they are screaming through the Caribbean and through here. So let's take a look at where this pattern is going to go. And we're going to start off first by looking here at the week 1 versus week 2 precipitation pattern. Now what you notice here is that we do see overall that near normal to drier than normal conditions are seen in central North Carolina, and then it gets drier than normal as you go east. That's the influence of that subtropical ridge. Notice too that the plains are dry. We do have a little bit of a ridge rider event possibly coming in late this week here, but that's a pretty tough forecast 5 days in advance. So we're going to see a lot of places go back over to hotter and drier conditions. What's the transition going to look like for us? Well, from week 1 through the 14th into week 2, which is the 15th to the 21st, see how the models are increasing the chances for rainfall? This is largely going to be based upon a shift in the jet stream pattern. I'm going to show you that in just a few seconds. First, this is what we've got. High-res European model run this morning. Let's play it on out. So what you're going to notice is, can you see this faint contour in through here? That's the subtropical ridge. So the flow comes around it. And there's that weak front tonight that's sitting right in through here. So we see these chances for scattered storms through Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday, which is when we're going to have our best chances for rain later on this week. Best chances for scattered storms. Now the atmosphere is juiced. When they are produced, some of these storms could put down 2 to 3 inches of rain. Predicting where that's going to be days in advance, not possible. But that front slides through by Friday, and higher pressure comes in behind it, which means our weekend temperatures are going to drop. So are our chances for precipitation. But this week, there will be places throughout the Carolinas and Virginia that don't measure a drop of rainfall. There's going to be places that the storms hit. That's what the nature of scattered storms that we get along these weak fronts. So our front's cleared by Saturday into Sunday. And then as you get into early next week, this is where the change begins to happen. You start to see by Monday and Tuesday, the models are becoming more widespread with some rainfall. A lot of that has to do with this. By next week, the jet stream pattern is going to take the ridge and start to push it back in this direction so it sets up right there. That allows a broader trough of low pressure to sit here, which is going to increase our chances for rain on stalled out frontal boundaries, and also kind of change things up in terms of our temperature pattern as well. So that is why when you go look at the week 2 pattern, we see better chances of seeing near normal to above normal rainfall. What I'm hoping to see is more of these storms get along the coast, where as we talked about in the beginning, that's where the drier regions currently reside. So we need to bring in better moisture into those areas. So watch for this pattern evolution, the ridge backing up to the west, and what that could mean for our total precipitation. From here, let's talk about temperatures, because one of the things I've been quite concerned about is how warm our nights have been. If you look at this map, which shows you July 1 all the way through August 7th, we're having a top 5 warmest overnight low temperature pattern here along the coastal Carolinas. And it's been warm in the Tennessee Valley, the Ohio River Valley, the lower Mississippi. I mean, you could see it. Very, very warm nights this year. As we look at where these temperatures are going to go, let's flip our attention back to the high temperatures. So you can see the front. That's the one that's coming toward us all week. So again, our flow has got a front here, and it's just kind of curling around like that. So this is Monday's highs going into Tuesday and Wednesday. So we're keeping a lot of these 90s around earlier in the week. By the time we get into Thursday, see how the front's approaching us? And Friday, the heat comes back into the midsection of the country, and our temperatures drop off 5, 6, 7, 8 degrees. Then we could see going into the weekend, look at this, highs in the low to mid 80s, possible, maybe a couple locations approaching 90, but that's much better than the heat we're going to be seeing at the beginning of the week. And as that trough builds in, watch, 5-day sliding window of temperatures. You see that as we get out there on the 5 days that ends right here on the 17th, so this would be the kind of the 12th through the 17th, we've got a cooler pattern in place. I say cooler, it's still summer, but it's maybe not as hot as it's been as of late. And with that trough staying there, the heat kind of goes into the midsection of the country, and we see some cooler weather along the east. Wild card, how long does this last? Do we ever see a ridge redevelop over the southeast? And what's going on right now with the tropics, which is what we tried to cover, all right? So there are several moving pieces which are going to make these weekly videos, I think, more informative on how to keep track of this longer term weather. What I would like to say is outside of the U.S., there are some issues going on. Europe is in the middle of another heat wave, especially in parts of France and Germany. They've basically been unable to shut the heat off all summer. It's also hot over in the Russian wheat belt right now, just something to think about. But it looks to be a stormier pattern. Notice how there's better storms coming from the Iberian Peninsula into France, although Central Europe is looking quite hot and quite dry. Ukraine, heavier rains west. And what's important about this is an area that had some drought development earlier in the year. So I got to keep a close eye on that. Finally, I would like to just talk briefly about South America, because for the last 90 days, which is the heart of the dry season north, so don't even look at the map in through here, okay? We've seen drier conditions showing up in parts of Argentina, in Paraguay, and even here in southern Brazil. Now, it's been wet down in Rio Grande do Sul and along the border here between Uruguay and Rio Grande do Sul. But as we just think about what this means, some drought stress down here in Argentina and southern Brazil could be really problematic, because while we don't expect the La Nina to fade until winter, which would be the middle of their summer, its influence may really last into a critical time period of September, October, November. They can start planting soybeans on September the 15th. We need to think about that. And we do see that the northern and eastern growing areas are forecast wet by the long-range models. But they're dry in southern Brazil. So you just think about it, about 40% of the soybean crop is here, and 60% of the soybean crop is there. And so we can see the drier conditions in southern Brazil extending to Argentina. This is a very La Nina pattern for September, October, November for South America, and could be very important for the start of the next growing season. Because with expected acreage increases of about 4% in Brazil, if they hit their trend production, they could be at 150 to 152 million metric ton of soybeans, which would be a huge crop. So this forecast for potential drought development south is going to be critical going forward. I'll keep you up to date on all of it. Appreciate your attention today, and we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks.